Merrick Garland. Let's give the Attorney General another hand. There will be a lot on the plate of the Attorney General and a lot for us to encourage the Justice Department to do over the next 4 years. Once again, good afternoon, brothers and sisters. It is indeed my honor and privilege to be here. I'm Attorney Michael Hardy. I'm the General Counsel, Executive Vice President of National Action Network, and this is our special legal night. Now, normally, legal night happens on the last Thursday of every month, and we always say that you know when legal night is, because if it's the last Thursday of the month, it is legal night at National Action Network. And, you know, the pandemic has had a lot of downsides, but it's also had one upside. The one upside is that we were forced to go virtual on the legal night, and therefore, since the pandemic and since we've gone virtual because of the pandemic, we've been able to get participation in legal night from both participants and attorneys from New York to Los Angeles, from Buffalo to New Orleans, and all in between across the United States, and including calls that we have gotten from Canada. So once again, in a general sense, if it's the last Thursday of the month, it'll be legal night at National Action Network. But here, we are at our national convention, and it's a Thursday, so what better reason than to just bring legal night right here. We're so proud of legal night, and let me just say, we have been in our 11th year of doing legal night at National Action Network, and we have a great team, and we want to just, our general legal night team, some of whom will be joining us, and we have some special guests, which I will be introducing to you very shortly. But our regular legal night team includes Robert Bellison, Andrew Burson, David Blum, Gary Certain, Kyle Edmonds, Jeffrey Emden, Barry Fett, who's also here today, Carmen Giordano, Pete Gleason, Kenneth Gilbert, Gabrielle Harbis, Ted Kessler, Glenn Myers, Kim Parker, Edward Perchado, Royce Russell, Joel Schmelken, Denise Service, Wiley Stecklow, Kareem Vessup, and we always give thanks to the staff that makes Legal Night possible, and that includes Cova McCall, Derek Perkinson, Patrice Perry, Brenda Ricketts, Arthur Robinson, Maxine Lewis, who is passed away, but she continues to, we honor her because she was such a critical part of our operation at National Action Network, and Winston Gilchrist, Brenda Dock. We also always honor our two emeritus. They were founding members of the Legal Night program in National Action Network. They are now justices here in New York State, meaning they sit on the New York State Supreme Court bench now, and that's the Honorable Senria Edwards and the Honorable J. Mashel Sweeting. So give all of them a hand because they helped to make Legal Night what it is. The other thing with Legal Night is we come to give voice to the voiceless. And so we will be coming to you because the whole purpose of Legal Night is for those who cannot get legal direction anywhere else. They can come to National Action Network and voice their issue, voice their concern, and the attorneys that volunteer for Legal Night are always there to give them some direction, and so that's what we will do today. There is no greater challenge that we face in this nation than the challenge involving police misconduct matters, and that is what we're going to address today, and that is why our special guests are with us today, because it is a challenge that we must face, particularly in communities of color, and a challenge of police-civilian relations that must be fixed. Richard Pryor had it right years ago when speaking about police interactions when he said, "It is just us." And we have to stop making it that we are always at the bad end of that relationship, so it really shouldn't be just us. It shouldn't be us at all, frankly. Today we explored this topic with our special guest, but let me say this. I don't agree with a lot of what the Chief Justice of the United States writes in many of his opinions, but I have agreed with his statement that he wrote in one of his decisions that said, "The way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discrimination on the basis of race." Clearly, easier said than done, but our work is to continue the efforts to stop discrimination on the basis of race, and most importantly, to stop it as it relates to policing. And we have great guests here today, and also some of our Legal Night panel that's joining us virtually. But first, let me introduce our very special guests that are with us on stage here and live at the convention. We have Barry Fett. Barry is a partner and a co-chair of the Civil Rights Division at Ella Lafrakis and Panic. Barry began representing victims of workplace and healthcare discrimination in federal and state court. She also was a part of the New York City Corporations Council Special Federal Litigation Division, which specifically dealt in defending the city in civil rights cases, and many of those cases, of course, involve situations that arose between police and citizens. She now, as I just indicated, headed up the Civil Rights Division at the law firm, and she is also a director of the Southern District of New York's chapter of the Federal Bar Association. Our second special guest is a son of Harlem, a husband and a father with 2 children. Alvin Bragg has spent the better part of 2 decades in the courtroom standing up to the powerful and fighting to get justice. Most recently, Alvin served as the Chief Deputy Attorney General in New York State, where he oversaw some of the office's biggest cases, including those against Harvey Weinstein and the fights against creating a hostile work environment and challenging the Trump administration over census for its inclusion of the citizenship question. But many of us truly remember Alvin because when Governor Cuomo signed the special prosecutor law with regard to police shootings of unarmed civilians, again, generally just us, Alvin was put in charge of the special prosecutors division that managed those and investigated those police-involved killings. And just as an aside, he didn't ask me to do this, but he also happens to be a candidate for Attorney General in the County of New York and the Borough of Manhattan. In the Borough of Manhattan.
District Attorney.
I said District Attorney. What?
You said Attorney General.
Oh, Attorney General. Oh, see, I got all these Attorney Generals, and he was. All right, let me do that again. He is a candidate for District Attorney in the Borough of Manhattan and the County of New York. And then joining us on the Zoom, we have some of our Legal Night participants, and I can see that we have Wiley Stecklow with us, and we welcome him. Wiley Stecklow is a partner in the Wiley Stecklow law firm. We also have, there used to be a picture right here. I can't, we have Joel Schmelken, who's with Schmelken and Associates. Is that David Yearwood? We have Royce Russell. Okay, Royce Russell is with us, and thank you all for being with us. And we have one other attorney. I can't tell who the other person is. Somebody help me. Is that it?
Carmen Giordano.
All right, we've got Carmen Giordano with us also. Now I can see who everybody is. All right, thank you. Let's give all of them a welcome. So let's kick it off because we have a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to, again, go right out. This is, and this panel is discussing the challenges in dealing with police misconduct matters. And again, 2 of our special guests have been very involved in this issue. So I'm going to start with Barry Fett, and Barry, why don't you give us some of your special comments on this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor, really, to be here. And me and my law partner, Gabriel Harvest, were both the chairs of the Civil Rights Division of our law firm, Elif Tarakis, and Panic. It's a tough name. And we have the honor of participating in Thursday night legal nights. So I just want to thank you, first of all. I do have a unique perspective because I actually used to work for the city of New York, in the Corporation Counsel's office in their law department. So basically, I used to defend the police and defend the city in cases involving police brutality, false arrest, malicious prosecution, similar to the types of cases we're seeing in the news now. So I have a unique perspective. I'm on the plaintiff's side now. I've been representing victims of police abuse, false arrest, wrongful convictions for a long time now. And you know, I can really see, since I've been on both sides, the systemic racism and problems with police policy, which actually allows these officers to do what they do. So for example, in the Derek Chauvin trial, you know, the brass of the police department want to call the officer a rogue officer, and that's, in a way, that's convenient for them because they're able to distance themselves, but he was working within their police policy and with their authority and their approval. This is an officer that had been on the force for decades, who had multiple civilian complaints, and I think even deaths, instances of civilian deaths in his custody. But he remained on the force, and not only did he remain on the force, but he's a field training officer, so he's training new officers. And so he's really a part of that police department, and he was following the policy, although obviously this was clearly a use of excessive force. So it's convenient now for the department after the fact to call him rogue, because in a way he's not. In a way he's an officer doing what officers have been allowed to do in these communities for decades. And you know, just one more thing if I can add quickly. You know, what's so horrible and interesting about the Derek Chauvin trial and George Floyd is that it just happened to be captured on video. And the entire incident, the entire use of force was captured on video. But there are so many instances all over this country that nobody ever knows about. And so we're lucky, but it's happening a lot. And there's different ways that the police are allowed to get away with it. It's things like qualified immunity. It's police policies that allow, you know, neck restraint. And it's also just a wall of police paperwork that whitewashes and hides police misconduct. And I just wanted to, if I can briefly, I wanted to just give an example of that kind of wall of whitewashing police misconduct, police abuse, through the paperwork, through terms that kind of put the onus or put the blame on the victim. And but for a video, the family and the civil rights lawyers, we would never know about the misconduct. So I just wanted to read briefly the initial press release that came out after George Floyd was killed by the police, but before the video had become widespread. And this is how the police department and the government described the George Floyd killing. Man dies after medical incident during police interaction. On Monday evening, shortly after 8 p.m., officers from the Minneapolis Police Department responded to the 3700 block of Chicago Avenue South on a report of forgery in progress. Officers were advised that the suspect was sitting on top of a blue car and appeared to be under the influence. 2 officers arrived and located the suspect, a male believed to be in his 40s, in his car. He was ordered to step from his car, and he got out and physically resisted the officers. Officers were able to get the suspect in handcuffs and noticed he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Officers called for an ambulance. He was transported to Hennepin County Medical Center by ambulance, where he died a short time later. That's upsetting, and it's a lie. And I think if we hadn't had the video that we're so fortunate to have, all the police paperwork thereafter would have followed suit, and that would have been the official story. And I just wanted to really make that known.
All right, thank you. Alvin, again, you had the very unique situation, and being the first of having to do something when Governor Cuomo signed the special prosecutor's law and the Attorney General at that time made you the chief of that new division. So in this whole complex of police, civilian, and misconduct situations, just some of your unique perspective on that.
Definitely, and maybe I can just pick up with a story that's a New York-based one, because you made me think about it. One of the things that bothers me so much about the Derek Chauvin matter, and is our mayor's response. Right? He immediately said, we have to do something. And right here in New York City, he's not doing so much on these issues. And so my story is related to my representation of Gwen Carr, a NAN stalwart, trying to still get details from this mayor, this city, about the officers who killed Eric Garner. We know Officer Pantaleo, former Officer Pantaleo, has been removed from the force, but so many other officers there that day. And to your story, we know Officer D'Amico, who was at the scene, assisted in the arrest, went back to his precinct and filled out an arrest report that said no force was used in arresting Mr. Garner. He didn't know there was going to be a video, right? It's the same issue. He didn't know there was going to be a video. Felt very comfortable filling out his report. He also said Mr. Garner had like 10,000 cigarettes on him, right? And here we are almost 7 years later. We're in court. I'll be in court on Tuesday with the city, still fighting to find out who the officers were at the scene, whether Officer D'Amico's been disciplined. If so, what was the discipline? And if not, why not? There's a specific part of the patrol guide in New York which says, if an officer tells a lie like this, he's to be removed from the force absent exceptional circumstances. So the question to the mayor and the commissioner, what are those circumstances here? So it's the same thing. Right. It's the same thing, and it coincides with the force so much. It's the cover up.
Right.
So I just wanted to sort of start where you ended. What we know from our eyes, but what I also saw from the cases I handled, is that the system just ensnares too much conduct, things that are not, or I believe should not be, within the criminal system. So the Derek Chauvin matter, this all started over a counterfeit bill, right? One counterfeit bill. We have civil lawsuits about millions of dollars. People go to court, no one dies, but we're over here sending a militarized police response over one counterfeit dollar. Mr. Garner, he was breaking up a fight. They alleged he was selling untaxed cigarettes. So untaxed cigarettes. We're going to respond to that with 5 officers. The most recent example in Minneapolis, air fresheners on a rearview mirror. So I think we have to not only think about the force, but the policing structure around the force that gives rise to these incidents. And then the last thing I would say is so much of this, and we've seen this again in the Chauvin trial, and I saw it in a case we tried at the AG's office, is what I call the black boogeyman defense, right? All else fails, the defense taps into the deep well of racism in America and the deep history of it, and will blame the black person who's died. So here they're trying to make much out of what was in his bloodstream. And we've seen this time and time again, going all the way back to Rodney King, he was big. Or frankly, going back throughout history, right? And even cases not involving the police. Emmett Till, well, he whistled at a white girl. I mean, there's always this sort of shifting away from the real misconduct. And so I think that one of the litigation challenges in these cases is to keep everyone's eye on the prize, on what actually happened. It's not what was in his bloodstream, it's this knee on the neck. And that is what, thankfully, the public, I think, most of the commentary is focused on. But I think that's one of the challenges in the courtroom is to keep the focus where it should be and not on the black person who was killed and what he might have been doing beforehand. And I say he because in this case it's a he, but we know it's not just men, but also women as well.
Right, absolutely. All right, one of the best things about Legal Night is eventually we come to you because it's really you that we want to hear from. But we do want to give our Legal Night attorneys a quick chance to chime in. And I'm just going to go by the way they're on the screen there. So I will start off with Attorney Wiley Stecklow. Good afternoon, Wiley, and just give us some very brief comments again because we really want to get the audience to be able to ask you guys and our special guests some questions, particularly as it may relate to the trial of Derek Chauvin.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much to Brother Michael Hardy and to everybody at the National Action Network, Reverend Sharpton, for organizing and inviting us here. I'm very happy to support the network, as I always do. I see the problem similar to the way it's been discussed by both Attorney Barry Fett and Mr. Bragg, that we've had this militarization of the police over the last 30 years, and they've been getting these different toys and these different gifts. I go to Randall's Island on a regular basis to take some of the boys to soccer practice, and they have a parking lot there of NYPD utility items, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they keep buying more vans and more toys. And what happens when the police have these toys? They want to use them. And how do they use them? They use them in over-policing our communities. So I'm very excited that Attorney General Merrick Garland was on today, and I'm looking forward to this new administration and the new day that we're hopefully going to see, where we're going to have professionals dealing with the issues they should be dealing with. When somebody's having a mental health issue, they'll have mental health professionals deal with it, not the police. When somebody's having a drug issue, they'll have people involved with narcotics and helping deal with that, not the police. And I think that's the future that we see, where we're not going to have the militarization of the police harming our community any longer. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
All right, thank you. Attorney Royce Russell, welcome and thank you for being with us. Give us some very brief comments.
Well, thank you for having me. And I would say that first, we need to realize, as colleagues have stated before, that there's a history in having communities of colors over-policed. And so, is there a need for someone to die because there's a alleged fraudulent $20 bill? Is there a need for someone to die because there's an air freshener, or there may have been a warrant for a misdemeanor? I think historically we need to understand that comes with the territory of living in America. And when I look at, it says National Action Network, and what I've heard from other speakers before and other seminars and workshops, it doesn't say National Reaction Network, it says National Action Network. And so I think as a culture, as a community, as a person of color that wears the suit of a lawyer during the day, father at night, African-American, 24 hours, 7 days a week, we need to be proactive and not reactive. And so we need to understand how we're perceived in America, not accept it, but understand it, and understand the obstacles that come with that. That being not getting proper discovery, that being living in a community that's over-policed, that being understanding that if someone is oppressing me, going to the police precinct to file a complaint with the Internal Affairs Bureau is not going to serve you. Understanding how you're positioned and how you can control an unlawful stop so you can help litigants fight for you in the future. I think the Chauvin trial shows and displays all of that. all of that we need to take hold and use in our control, whether it is a camera by way of phone, whether it is Dante Wright calling your parent when you're stopped so they can hear what is going on, whether it is the lieutenant in Virginia raising his hand and asking the question, why do I need to step out of the car? And being active in action area rather than reacting to what we know is coming to us and coming at us, and understanding how we can maneuver in this system unfairly but righteously is one of the keys to success. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to answering any questions before us.
All right. Thank you, Attorney Russell. Attorney Carmen Jack Giordano, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. It's an honor to be here on this program, and much appreciation to the National Action Network for doing this wonderful work. And Michael, it's evident today that all these isolated incidents that we've read about over the years are not simply isolated incidents, but they're part of a pattern. They're part of a nationwide epidemic, a nationwide problem. And I'm very thankful to be a part of this group here because but for the efforts of groups like NAN and attorneys like the individuals here that are participating, a lot of the people that are victims of police violence do not have a voice and are unable to effectively communicate to the greater population exactly what they're going through and the extent of the discrimination, the extent of the violence, and the extent of lack of recourse that the powerless and the disenfranchised often have against the police and the government. So, people have mentioned video here. For instance, if not for the recording of some of these incidents, we would never hear about them, and we would never see just how grossly violent and horrendous that they are. So I think the positive perspective that I have on these incidents is that it is forced the country as a whole to address this problem as an epidemic, and it's not going to be silenced, and it's not going to be suppressed any further. So thanks very much.
All right. And then next up is Attorney Joe Schmelken of Schmelken Associates.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, members of the NAN family, and my fellow colleagues of Law Committee, really for doing a heads-up job and putting together this convention during these difficult times, of course, during the pandemic. It's really an honor and a privilege to be part of such a great group that really cares about our community and about people that really have no other place to go to get legal rights, legal assistance. We've all watched the George Floyd tragedy, the Derek Chauvin trial. And when you ask most people about what disturbs them the most, people are going to say about that knee on the neck for 9.5 minutes. People are going to say about 3 cops standing around doing absolutely nothing when really they had a duty to intervene and do something. But I see more than that. And I see a situation, a pattern over here where the defendant's attorney, Chauvin's attorney, and the defense in general are taking the approach to blame the victim. Let's not forget one thing. No matter what happens in this trial, George Floyd is a victim. He's the victim. And I see a pattern in terms of trying to defend their defendant by blaming the victim. And I see this all over. I've been trying personal injury cases since the 1980s, and I see many, many times where a defendant's attorney is going to blame the victim, to throw out what we call a red herring, to take your eye off the bullseye, to make you decide a case for the wrong reasons. In this particular case, we've seen, and it really disgusts me when I see things like blaming him for claiming drug abuse. Was there ever any determination that he overdosed on drugs, on heroin, on cocaine? Was there ever any determination that he was walking like a zombie or like a speed demon, or talking about his heart condition or his medical problems. Look, even assuming he did have it, let's not forget that the straw that broke the camel's back, if in fact that there were other circumstances, was a knee on this man's neck for 9.5 minutes. Resisting arrest. How is somebody resisting arrest if he's on the ground with handcuffs, with a knee on his neck? You know, when you yell, "I can't breathe," that's not resisting arrest. That's a cry for help, crying for the help for people that are there to help you. You know, things like the crowd yelling and insults, that makes the cop do what he did? Is this a real defense? You know, this is a cop that was, well, he was a veteran. He wasn't a rookie. I think they said, what, 20 years on the force? So many areas of training. It just bothers me. I don't mean to give a summation, but I got to tell you, when I see things like this and I see blaming the victim, that really bothers me. And people really have to do the right thing. And hopefully, justice will be done on this particular case, and justice in general in America on these police cases will be done where people really do the right thing for the right reason, keeping their eye on the bullseye. And I certainly am always here to help out, to answer whatever questions. And Mike, thank you, NAN members. Thanks again.
All right, all right. So what we're going to do now is we'll take some of your questions. Tyleek McMillan, hold up your hand. If you, wherever he's going to set up, that's where you want to go so that you can ask a question. And so you should start, if you have a question, you should start moving over towards Tyleek McMillan. And while we're seeing that, let me ask both of you, you know, there's been a lot of talk, and you heard the Attorney General and in what he had to say today. Right now in the Congress, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is before the Congress. The act addresses a number of issues. Of course, one of them is creating a reckless standard with regard to that conduct. But you can comment on the Policing Act, or since both of you are involved in this on a day-to-day basis in your own practices, and others that are doing wrongful convictions, and which I know, Barry, you do, is there something in policing that all governments, local, federal, that we really should be trying to figure out how we can bring a change that could have some significant impact?
I'm happy to take the first half
Yeah.
and then maybe Floyd in a second. So the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, I mean, we need to get it passed, right? And it has so many important components. One is creating a nationwide database of misconduct so we can track. You think about Tamir Rice, the boy who was shot in Cleveland. That officer had been let go from another police department. We need to be able to track that, so this bill would do that. You mentioned qualified immunity earlier. This bill would pull back on qualified immunity. One of the biggest pieces of it, it would only apply to federal agents, and I think if I could change one piece of the law in all the states, this bill would, for federal agents, say that agent cannot kill someone unless it's a matter of last resort. To me, that's just a proportionality principle that should be in our law, but it's not. It's not in our federal law, and it's not in our state law in New York. And I think that law change is so important. Just makes sense to me, right? I'm an officer. If I have something else I can do before killing you, I should take that step. So we need to put that in the law. George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would do that at the federal level, and I think we need to be doing it, at the state level as well. I think that would be a consequential step. But everything we've talked about is so interconnected, right? It's so hard to put on one. I think shrinking the system and getting some of these things that just shouldn't be crimes and removing it. And, if you want to do something about it, give them a ticket and say, come to court later. But in terms of law reform, I think that should be a front burner issue, getting that law passed. And the last resort principle is something we need to do in New York as well.
Right. And Barry, there are really so many ways, not just with shooting someone or in the worst case scenario, killing. There's so many ways that if police don't act with principle, they can ruin people's lives. I mean, the wrongful misconduct doesn't just extend to excessive force, if you will.
Right, that's exactly right. And the recent killing of the young man, also in Minnesota, I mean, that was initially a stop because of something wrong with his registration, and that's a good example. It's like they're about to really mess up this kid's, I'm not talking about the horrific act of killing him, but even just the stop of messing up this kid's life, because he's about to go through the system, you know, because for a person of color, when they get stopped by the police, it's a very different experience. And he knows it. And so when the police are stopping him for something as minor as an issue with his registration, well, now they see, oh, he's got a warrant. And we don't know anything about that warrant. What happens a lot with the people is that they get stopped on something minor, right? And now they have to appear in criminal court for some kind of minor infraction. Even, believe it or not, in New York City, jaywalking. Okay, they get a ticket for jaywalking. Now they have to appear in court and defend themselves. Well, that means they either have to leave school or leave work, and now they're going to criminal court to defend themselves. If they don't appear for whatever reason, they forgot the date or they didn't know, now there's a warrant. And so it's like a snowball effect in their lives that they're never able to really get above, because the way the system is set up to keep them down. And so, yeah, you know, the incident starts with a mere traffic violation, but we know, you know, people in these communities and attorneys, we know what the potential is, and it's death, which is extreme and awful, but it's also just a hanging up of this person's life where they just can't move forward. And so I think, just to answer your first part of your question, I do think that there has to be some kind of reform involving officers in the community and seeing the community as them and us, not separate, but we're all the same, we're together. And these are kids, and I want them to succeed. And I don't want to be a bully on the street trying to handcuff them and take them in. I want them to succeed. And that's how our officers need to feel and believe when they go in the streets to police these communities. They're a part of that community, and we need policies that support that, not policies that support force and extreme uses of force. And when you do it, let's cover it up so that nothing happens to you and we're going to blame it all on him. Those are the kinds of changes we need.
All right. And you know, movements matter. You know, the numbers that have rose up across the country as a result of the Trayvon Martin case, as a result of the Eric Garner case, and as a result of the George Floyd case, that matters because we saw the video also in Virginia of an Army member of the armed forces who was pulled over, told to put his hands out the window. The officer not only pepper sprays him, but then says, you know, whichever way you want to handle this, meaning the Army, the driver of the car that they stopped, it's not going to affect me.
Right.
But because of the movements across this country, that officer woke up the next day and realized that he lost his job. So it matters. We're going to take these questions. We have some time for questions. We'll take as many as we can, and all of the attorneys will participate if they choose to answer the question.
Thank you to everybody participating in today's program. My name is Joe Gonzalez, and I direct my question to today's panelists. I ask you to comment on proposed laws in many states that would make it a crime to videotape the police. How do you respond to those current proposals in about 15 states? Thank you.
I'll respond. I mean, I think that they violate the First Amendment.
Yep.
And I mean, I think I could start there and end there. I mean, I think they violate the First Amendment, and they're a product of really trying to intimidate people. Now that we're getting the evidence to document what police are doing, this is a response by government to squash that. But if that is litigated before a fair court, that should be, those laws should be struck down on First Amendment grounds, right? The police can say, well, you can't stand right here because you're in the way, maybe, but they certainly can't tell you you can't record. So I think those should be struck down.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, NIA 2X, Greater DC Chapter, NAN.
Welcome.
Thank you, great panel. How serious is the movement? Because we have a different component. We have the problems with the police department, but the other component is the grand juries. When you think about the Breonna Taylor crisis. So how serious is the movement to change also the grand jury? Is that covered in the George Floyd Justice for Policing Act as well? But changing the grand jury, who's a lot protects the police officers, as we saw here in New York, they're secret, and I think the prosecutors are not involved in it. How serious is a ground movement to change the grand jury and the way they do their job?
Great
Thank
question. Grand juries, anyone want to start with that? Alvin?
So the George Floyd Justice Policing Act, to my knowledge, does not address grand juries. Federal practice is a little different. We've got 50 states, 50 different laws. I think about half of the states have required grand juries, but about half don't. In New York State, we got a bill that was introduced by an assembly member named Danny O'Donnell that would give more transparency. I think it's just to the legal instructions given to the grand jury. So I think more attention needs to be brought to this issue. When I was at the Attorney General's office, one thing we did when we didn't bring a charge, we would structure our investigation so we would minimize grand juries so we could maximize disclosure, and we would do a report. I've been pushing that model to others around the country. There's some have responded, but I think this is a really important issue. So I think this moment we don't really have a movement on this issue, and we need one. We need this to be given priority so we can get a window in and have transparency, and so that these decisions aren't all made behind closed doors.
If I can add to that.
Anybody else?
Yes, can I add to that? When I'm responding to how serious we are as serious as you, the person that is asking the question, and those in the audience want to be. And what do I mean by that? That means we have candidates that are running for district attorneys throughout New York. And if that is not something that you address with that candidate to say, how do you feel about this? What is your understanding of this when it comes down to police shootings? Should there be some other process so you have a good sense of who you're voting for? Then we're not serious at all. But if those questions are brought to the forefront and the candidate can articulate what the importance is of a grand jury, their interaction between the district attorney's office and police and the grand jury, because the grand jury is not an entity that floats on its own. What makes a grand jury, as speaking as a former prosecutor, is the person, the assistant district attorney, that is presenting the case for which the grand jurors rely on and see every day. So it is as important and as powerful as a movement as the voters will make it by ensuring that the candidates that are running for these positions understand the need for change.
All right, thank you, Attorney Russell. Any of the other attorneys wanting to address that question? All right, thank you. Next question.
Grace and peace, everyone. My name is Chaplain Sandra Mitchell, and I'm a proud member of the New York City Harlem chapter, and I am the National Crisis Liaison. My question is, Mr. Joel Schmelken, my brother, he's helped me on a lot of cases, and he mentioned something that I had to get up. For the mental health, I'm a mental health advocate, I am a counselor, and my peers, I call them my peers, they are suffering at the hands of the police, whereas they're just having an emotional time, or they have allergic reaction to their psychotropic meds, and they're out there in the street, they're taking off their clothes, they're screaming, and usually they wind up dead. So also I'm a member of the crisis community for crisis intervention, and I want to know will you be able to help us to help form laws that will help to protect us? Because one day it could be you having an allergic reaction to medication and you're out there on the street. We don't want you to have a bullet, and we don't want bullets either. Will you be able to help us? Can I connect you?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And I think we should get a couple of people to touch on that because I think the other part of that Sandra is also addressing, there are so many situations, unfortunately, that we've seen where people, and many times it is the family member that has reached out to 911, and they literally, because they have played the 911 tapes after the fatal situations have happened, and you can hear them on the tape saying, my son, my daughter, my husband, my niece, my whatever, they are off their meds, I need help, can you come and help me? And you see these situations, and again, the police arrive rather than, and they, in many cases, they understand that they are arriving to a situation of a person that's mentally distressed, and they end up in the use of fatal force. And certainly that is something that needs to be addressed. I know that in New York City and probably in others, there have been a development of emotional disturbance response rules that are created, but how do we move on that? And again, everyone can respond.
I wouldn't mind saying a couple words on that at some point.
You can start, Carmen.
Thanks. Sorry, it's difficult for me to hear everyone. Thanks again, Michael. Several years ago, I litigated a case against the city of New York for several police officers who shot and killed a schizophrenic man who was in crisis, and he was decompensated, and he was paranoid, he was hallucinating, and he was desperate, and he entered a police precinct in Queens, New York, with a screwdriver and, according to the police, a kitchen knife, though that was disputed in litigation. And they encircled him. He was screaming, and multiple police officers just surrounded him. Not one individual police officer tried to engage with him and calm him down and settle the situation down, but they ended up firing several shots in a circle, wounding some of their own members of the service and killing my client. And that litigation went on for almost 10 years in the Eastern District of New York, and it led to some interesting changes. At that time in Memphis, Tennessee, there was one of the best programs that police departments in the United States have. That program utilized training specific officers and making sure there was at least one specially trained officer in each precinct that could respond to situations where a mentally ill person was decompensated or in crisis. To a large extent, it's unfortunate, perhaps somewhat inevitable, that it's the police that often are called upon in these situations, and they're not properly trained to handle these situations. I don't know if it's a militarization or a defensiveness, but they're not really well trained to deal with these type of situations and these people. And I think obviously training is really important. Basic things. This is, one of the largest, if not the largest, police departments in the country. And, for a police officer to encircle a man who's hallucinating and, definitely in mentally ill, and all of them yell at this person at the same time, trying to get him to do something reasonable when he's not in his right mind, is just foolishness. And, there was no effort to de-escalate that situation, and there was no effort to handle it properly. So I think training is very important, and I think there has to be kind of an overall systemic approach and coordination of effort between different service providers and mentally ill people. It's really, really sad. I've known many, many people over the years who, you know, you can't really see a mental illness on a person, but it's just as if they had a broken leg or, you know, had some type of injury. It's just internal. And the police just aren't trained to properly identify that and deal with it. We had another client who was an autistic teenager who was playing outside his home, and he was different. And the police ended up assaulting him and abusing him very badly when he was afraid of them, when they asked him to stop because they thought he was peering into cars, trying to steal cars. And they really, you know, beat the daylights out of this young man and injured him very badly. So I think training is very important, and coordination of efforts among different providers in the system is crucial.
Okay. Yes, Al.
So I would go a step further than that and just ask why we have the police who aren't mental health professionals respond. And there's some other models. I mean, so Oregon has a model locality there where they're sending out medical health professionals in the first instance, and their success rate, defining success on when they've got to call the police in, is really high. It's close to 100%. We're piloting a program like that now in Harlem and East Harlem, but I think we got to get that to scale so that the first call is not to the police, but to someone actually, you know, fully trained. And then if they've got to call the police in, yes, definitely calling in police who have some training. And this is really, you look at the data of folks killed by police, 25 to 50% of those folks starts with a mental health call.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, one of the things in New York City, de Blasio and the First Lady had started what they call a CIT or CTI training. It never really got off the ground. Less than 1/3 of the precincts had that type of training where there would be an officer or a social worker that would go with the police officer to a particular site if there was a mental crisis. And that just never, ever had become a movement and implemented over the long term and within precincts. So we have failure to, I guess, fortify financially and to demand that type of training and that type of response happens in New York City. Two, there's a certain mindset that we need to come face to face with. And if you know law enforcement officers, whether this is right or wrong, it is what it is that when they get a call like that, they really don't want to go. They really don't want to be bothered. And we can look at why, but as a person that makes the call, you need to understand that is what you're facing. You're oftentimes facing with, oh my God, I gotta go here. I really don't wanna go here. And I think to elevate the conversation and have some uniformity as far as police training is concerned, they need to go into psychological evaluation every 8 months, every 12 months. If you do any job over a period of time, there's a certain jadedness that you have, whether good or bad. And that needs to happen.
That's an excellent point. All right, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Next question.
Hello, Felicia Simmons. I'm president of the Monmouth Ocean County National Action Network out of Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So this is something near and dear to my heart, because in a town of 1.3 square miles, we've had 2 deaths within 2 years of people holding a scissor and one holding a little steak knife by the police officers. Hassani Best and Michael Mizell. We have a systemic problem, and it goes to grand jury because the officer who just killed the Hassani Best has still not been charged yet because the lack of grand jury. And we have a special task force issue because these people all belong to this so-called street team, a special task force. In other areas, they're called no-knock task force that receive the no-knock warrants. And that's what happened with Breonna Taylor. It's a systemic issue of these special secret task force that are called in to to terrorize communities. They most likely operate in black and brown communities. So how will you stop, or how can we stop nationally? Because again, I'm not from New York, I'm from New Jersey. How can we stop nationally these special task force and these secret grand juries? My cure for the secret grand jury is being able to opt into grand jury. In our area, you can't opt in to be a juror, right? People think it's voter registration, but in New Jersey, it's actually being registered at motor vehicles. So being able to opt in to being a juror, you'll have a bigger pool. And then also, this mess is killing me. I know. I'm trying to ask one question at a time, but I'm just passionate. So how can we stop these special task force of secret police, Gestapo, in our cities and our black communities? And then second, how do we stop the cities who won't react to these special task force or policing? Our Attorney General in New Jersey are trying police licensing in our city, where you can, like a beautician, you need a license. A cop, you should be able to have a license to go around the police unions, right, and these things. So how would y'all attempt, legal team, to attempt or legislation to help these things forward? Did y'all understand that? It was a lot.
Anybody want to tackle that?
I think it's just making an issue as you see it on a one-on-one basis. As they say, you see something, do something, making complaints with your local civilian complaint review board, asking for investigations to take place, and just making an issue as you see it one by one.
Michael? Yep. I think there needs to be more transparency. I don't have an answer directly to what you're saying, but I think overall there needs to be more transparency of what the police are doing, what happens to them when they do something wrong, because it's so shrouded in secrecy and an air of protecting them from any consequences. And so, for example, if you do go to make the complaint to your local, CCRB in New York City, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, citizens, they believe that they're going and they're making a complaint and it's actually going to be investigated and heard, and that's not what's happening. It's set up in a way that protects the police. And I don't have all the statistics, but well over the majority of civilian complaints against the police for things like abuse, false arrest, force, those are unsubstantiated by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And then that is used in a civil case, in my lawsuits, against the plaintiff, because now the city can use that as a weapon and say, no, we've been investigated, and it's been found that it was unsubstantiated, we did nothing wrong. The only other body I know of, really, that civilians go to is the Internal Affairs, but that's within the police. And the police are protecting the police. We need an outside body, a transparent process, where we can really understand what officers are doing, what they've done wrong, look at the paperwork, and hold them accountable. And I just very quickly wanted to answer the comment about the cameras. I agree, it's just the First Amendment and that's it. But I also think that there should be some type of discipline for officers who, what I find in my practice a lot is that my clients come in and they say, I taped the incident, I had videotape, but the officers confiscated my phone and deleted it. And so oftentimes these citizens that are doing nothing wrong, they're not breaking any laws, but they're videotaping, they get taken in for some bogus arrest. Sometimes just so that the officers can go into their phones and erase them. And so civilians shouldn't be stopped from safely and reasonably videotaping what an officer's doing, but officers, there should be some accountability for officers who are going in and destroying evidence by destroying these videos and these phones.
Yeah, and let me just add to that. The one good thing about New Jersey is we have a very good, structured, statewide organization there, and I think New Jersey, we're activists, so I think you guys need to start that process in New Jersey, approaching the legislators there, the governors there, and begin to lay out a roadmap for legislation, and if necessary, if there's process for putting some questions on the ballot, we should do that work and get it done. Okay, so we are winding down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two questions and then we'll answer them.
Hi, Robert Bush with the Las Vegas chapter of National Action Network, and your answer kind of led into my question, which is in Nevada and also in California, we have a version of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which makes it harder to discipline and also to convict officers and allows them to be able to hide out under protection. And so my question is how does the George Floyd Policing Act address that, or if it does? And then also my question is there a national movement going on or that we can start that does not protect officers? Law is on the books in many states across the union.
That does not say
I'm sorry?
the last part of what you said?
The law is on the books or it's a law in many states across the State of the Union.
All right, thank you. The final question?
Yes. Hi, I'm glad that you're here. I'm a lifetime member of National Action Network based in Harlem, New York. My general question is, I hear your legal minds at work basically bringing up the defects that currently exist in the federal laws, the George Floyd Policing Act. Being attorneys, is there an independent group of attorneys that deal specifically with federal law that can communicate with legislators to now enhance the federal laws pertaining to policing? I hear the talk, but is there a group of attorneys who actually can talk to legislators to now implement amendments?
Yes, there are a number of groups that do that, including the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, among others, the American Civil Liberties Union, National Action Network. You have a lot of groups that do that.
That are currently working at filling these gaps in the law? Are they currently working on filling the gaps in the federal policing?
They are, and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is one of them. Again, it's an ongoing process. All right.
I'm gonna ask one last question while I have the mic. In regards to body cameras, a lot of times we see cases where police officers and the cases ends and the community wants to know what happened because of body cameras, and a lot of police officers say, well, I don't have body camera footage. What happens where we can address officers who don't turn on their body cameras to stop the viewership of their incident with folks in the community?
All right. So I'm going to get both of our special guests. You got 1 minute, so you can incorporate any of the answers to these, but let's make our 1 minute closing. And before they do that, let me thank all of our Legal Night attorneys that joined us. We appreciate you. We thank you for being with us. Take us out.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the questions. I think all of this is integrated, right? So from the size of the system, which I talked about earlier, what we're arresting people for, untagged cigarettes, counterfeit bill, I think it starts there. And then I think the accountability, and it comes in so many different ways and so many different forms. We need to lean in, and I would just say it's not just this. We need the national law, but I think we all need to be thinking locally. And we had a couple of other speakers who call to action. So if there's something that's on your mind, to push it locally. All these issues are so important, and sometimes I think it's so much. I think at least for me, you can have a paralysis where you start. I think you pick the one thing that is the most important to you. If that's grand jury secrecy, if that's body cameras. For me, the issue of sort of lying by police officers is something that's probably near the top of my list. And you just start there, and you start pulling at the threads, and we're going to keep on going. National Action Network, you've been doing this for a long time. We got to keep on keeping on, and there's lots of work to be done.
All right, Barry Fett?
I agree. I just think that there's momentum right now, and we just can't let that die. When this trial's over, there's going to be more, unfortunately, more incidents, and we just can't stop what we're doing. And I agree, it's the communities. The communities have to go into into the policing. And what I mean by that is, police need to be held accountable. They have to answer to us. They're policing us. We're the taxpayers. And we have to expect that, and we have to be actively involved so that this momentum doesn't die, and we can keep moving for this reform.
All right, Joel Schmelken, Royce Russell, Wiley Stecklow, Jack Giordano, Alvin Bragg, and Barry Fett. Thank you so much for making this special legal night happen here at the National Action Network Convention, and thank all of you that participated with your questions. We will continue to move on, and right now we have a great panel coming up. It's on environmental justice and healthcare in the wake of COVID. It's being moderated by Reverend Ron Saylor. He's the Southeast Regional Director of National Action Network, and he's coming to us now.